Welcome back. South Africa's murder rate is currently at a 20-year high of 45 people per 100,000. This represents a 52% increase compared to the 2011 and 2012 statistics. The Institute for Security Studies held a seminar today on these high rates to unpack what's really driving these crime trends. David Bruce is a researcher for the institution. He joins us now. David, good evening. Thank you so much for your time. Of course, you specialize on crime and policing. We've been talking about how historic the current murder rates are. It doesn't get any better, David, because not only are these rates high, what we've seen in the last couple of days with the brutality that is linked to the murder is something that continues in this country.
Right. Well, I think, yes, I think murder as a rule is a brutal crime. But if I can maybe refer to some of the things that we were highlighting today in this, when we launched this policy brief on these high murder rates, because, as reflected in your introduction, the murder rate in South Africa is now at its highest in 20 years. It's increased steadily since it reached a low point in the 2011 to 2012 financial year. And so what we did was try to understand, what is driving this increase in the murder rates. And the one aspect that emerged very clearly is that these murder rate isn't increasing uniformly across the country. In fact, there are several provinces where murder has increased very little or in fact decreased. But if you want to understand what is happening currently in South Africa in terms of murder, the main provinces that are contributing to this increase are KwaZulu-Natal, the Eastern Cape, Gauteng, and to a lesser degree the Western Cape. And so it's in those four provinces that murder has increased most dramatically. And it's because of those increases that the overall increase in the national murder rate has taken place.
Well, what do all these four provinces have in common that's directly linked to why the murder rate is increasing?
Well, you see, that's an interesting question. The one thing is that, for instance, the problem of the proliferation of firearms might be something that's common to some of these provinces. It seems that, for instance, firearm-related homicides are quite high in KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng, and the Western Cape. But then, for instance, if you look at the Eastern Cape, the Eastern Cape has had a very high murder rate for quite a long time. For a long time, it's been one of the provinces with one of the highest murder rates in the country. And, from available information, it appears that firearms are not the major weapons that are used in murder in the Eastern Cape. So, it's something of a mixed picture. And, what we're arguing is partly that we need to drill down and understand much more clearly what's going on in each of these provinces if we want to tackle this problem.
Let's talk about how we move on from the point of just recording the numbers and a government that is largely reactive, at least from what the picture that the numbers paint, to being proactive and have preventative measures. What are academics and experts like yourself recommending in this policy review?
Well, you see, there are things that can be done. There are quite practical things that can be done. Where we need to start off with in South Africa is acknowledgement and recognition of the problem. So on the currently available evidence, the government it barely seems to be aware that South Africa has one of the highest murder rates in the world, that murder has escalated dramatically over the last 10 or 11 years. So if you look at, for instance, any of the recent public statements by, for instance, the Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster, which is the cluster of cabinet ministers which is supposed to be responsible for safety and and policing in South Africa, you don't actually even find any acknowledgement in their statements that there is a critically serious problem of murder in South Africa. And so, in order to respond to this problem in a purposeful way, the simple thing is that we need to start with acknowledgement, with recognition of the problem.
Why do you believe that acknowledgement, David, isn't there? Because we have families in this country that are really dealing with incredible trauma as a result, firstly, of the high crime levels, and then added to that, the high murder rate. The fact that, there's the sense that government simply is not in touch with what the nation is going through, especially given how high these numbers are, is ridiculous in many respects. Why do you believe that there is this disconnect?
Well, you see, I mean, there's various aspects to the answer to that question, but, again, at quite a simple level, it reflects the fact that government isn't looking at the overall crime and violence situation in the country in a kind of systematic way, in a comprehensive way, isn't providing a kind of strategic type of response to the problem. So the way in which, government is responding to the problem seems to be very reactive. There's, from day to day, from week to week, month to month, there's one or other facet of the problem of crime and violence that, attracts public attention. And, and then what we tend to see is, in statements that, coming from government sources, what we see is that, some acknowledgement of, one or other facet of the crime problem. But for some reason, if we had a bit more time, I would be willing to go into it, but I don't think we have the time right now. Government seems to, almost be quite kind of blind to the fact that we have a chronically serious problem of fatal violence in this country.
Do you believe that the efforts that are coming out of government to respond to the crime situation are clear, that they are streamlined, and that all of government is speaking with one voice over how to tackle the high crime rate?
You see, I mean, for fear of repeating myself, I don't think that there is real kind of strategic leadership coming from government in, responding to the overall crime and violence situation. So, for it to do so, it would have to acknowledge that, the situation is a very challenging one, that there's, a wide range of facets of the problem of crime and violence that cry out for kind of urgent attention. And it would have to put forward a kind of, strategic approach, which, reflects a clear sense of what government's priorities are in addressing the problem of crime and violence. But if you look at the kind of statements, the kind of responses that are coming from government, there isn't any evidence of that strategic approach. It's all, it's consistently very reactive, highlighting, perhaps one, facet of the problem of violence which may be significant in some way, but reflects that government doesn't have a grasp of the overall crime and violence challenge which the country is faced with and which people are living through.
Independent crime and policing researcher David Bruce.